So, about 2 years ago, a friend of mine had moved into his own apartment. The sofa that was in it was old and worn, so he decided that he would try and find one in better condition. He asked me to help him look for one as my dad had a van and we would need to use that to transport the sofa. So, we went on Craigslist to have a look at what other people had for sale. We came across one ad that stated a 3-seater cream leather sofa, great condition, free to first viewer. There was a picture of it and it looked in perfect condition. Now the ads had been up for a week, so we thought that maybe it was gone already, and that they just hadn't taken the ad down yet. So my friend contacted the seller and nearly instantly got a reply saying that they still had the sofa, and it was available if we could collect it. I was a bit wary that it was still available. I mean, a free sofa in perfect condition that had been up for a week and nobody has taken it yet. We thought that there was maybe something wrong with it that could only be noticed when viewing the sofa in person, and it was probably hidden during the pictures. It was a weekend and we had no plans, so we decided that we would go and check out the sofa. My friend contacted the seller back and organized a time and place to meet up. They decided on a local McDonald's car park at 9 p.m., as the seller said that he was in work until 8 p.m., and he would need time to get ready after work. The seller said that he would be driving a green Honda Accord with a trailer. So we pulled up to the McDonald's car park at about 8:50 p.m. There were loads of people around, so we had no reason to think that we would be in danger or anything. At about 8:55, my friend got a text saying that the seller was about 15 minutes away, and they asked him to describe what vehicle we were in. So he described the van that we were in to him. About 5 minutes after he had texted the seller what vehicle we were in, an overweight man around 50 years old with a gray scruffy beard and greasy hair approached the driver's side window of the van, which was my side and I was driving the van. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt with looked like food stains all over it, with black jeans with holes torn in them and dried mud stains all over them, along with a pair of black steel-toe cap boots also covered in dried mud. He knocked on my window, so I rolled it down a bit. "You boys here for the sofa?" he said in a gravelly voice. It sounded like he needed to cough, but he couldn't get it out. Yeah, I said to him. "Rob's car is broken down just on the road and his phone batteries died. I was with him and I walked up to get you guys. He's with the car waiting for AA, but you can come down and collect the sofa off of him." Me and my friend looked at each other unsure of what to think. "Can I get in the van and we'll go back to Rob together?" the guy asked. "How far down the road is he?" I asked before he replied. "No, not too far, but I need to show you where to go." At this stage, my friend pretended to get a phone call. "Hello? Yes." No, wait, really. We'll be right there," he said before pretending to hang up his phone. He looked at me and said, "Hey, we gotta go. My dad needs us to help him with his flat tire." I nodded, knowing that it was a fake call for us to get the heck away from this creepy guy. "Hey, we gotta go now, but we'll contact you tomorrow about the sofa." The guy just stared at us as I rolled up my window and started to drive away. Me and my friend looked at each other. That was creepy. I got bad vibes off that guy, my friend said. "Definitely," I replied to him. We decided to drive around the back of the car park to see if we could find out if the guy was up to something or not. We could see him standing in the same spot where we had left him, and he was on the phone. He put his phone down, and about 2 minutes after that, a car pulled up with 3 men in it, and he got in. My friend's phone started ringing, and it was the number of Rob, the guy who was supposedly giving away the sofa. He answered. "Hey, can you meet tomorrow? I can hold on to the sofa for you until then." As he was on the phone, I noticed one of the men in the car that had collected the creepy guy was also on the phone. My friend told Rob that he would contact him tomorrow, and that he was busy and he couldn't talk right now. At the same time that my friend hung up the phone, the guy who was in the car also finished his phone call. At this point, I explained that to my friend that there was probably no car that had broken down, and that creepy guy was trying to lure us somewhere, so the guys in the car could do God knows what to us. We drove home and my friend blocked the number of Rob, and we never heard from them again. We reported the ad and it was removed the next day. About 2 years ago, I moved into a new apartment. The walls were very thin, and because of the fire safety laws in my city, my bedroom had one window which led into the living room, and none with outside access. The window will be important later. It was 3 bedrooms, one for me, one for the master tenant, and one spare, which at the time was rented out to a pretty friendly guy. Well, the friendly guy had issues with his work visa, and had to move back to Canada last minute, leaving us about 2 weeks to find another roommate. Our quickest and easiest option was Craigslist. Due to my work schedule, I had no part in the selection process, but was content when the new roommate moved in a little bit later. He seemed a bit off, but friendly. He was a very tall, large guy, but pretty quiet, and not someone that I wanted to go out of my way to hang with, but was okay to be around and be cordial with. About 2 weeks into his move-in, the master tenant left for Hawaii, leaving him and I alone in the home for the month-long duration of his stay. For the first few days, things were normal. All of a sudden, about 4 days into the trip, I'm woken up at about 8 a.m. to a frantic knocking at my door. Roommate, we'll call him Kyle, is standing there when I open it, looking frazzled. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "So, do you want to tell me about what happened last night?" To which I was shocked and confused, because I had come home from work at about 9 p.m. and immediately showered and went to bed. I explain this to him and he tells me that he heard me screaming and arguing with someone in my room, and that he saw me in the side alley of the window, arguing with our landlord, whom I had never even seen at that point, and that he heard people coming in and out of our house. I tell him no way, none of that ever happened. After staring at me for a little longer, he leaves and he doesn't bring it up again. The next morning, I wake up to the same thing. This time, he says that he saw me arguing with my boyfriend. I was single at the time. He had seen me talking with our other roommate, who's in Hawaii, and asked me for a badge number of the officer that I had spoken to, since he had apparently seen me talking to a bunch of police as well. This time, I get angry and more or less tell him to cut this out, because I'm not doing anything and I don't know what he's talking about. He gets a weird look on his face and says, "I think I had a seizure in my sleep. The next time it happens, I'll call an ambulance." And then he leaves for a bit, only to start knocking again about an hour later. And when I open up, Kyle repeats the exact same story verbatim. This happens once more before I tell him to leave me the heck alone and I leave for work. I go to work as normal, and I am reluctant to return that night, but I am too tired to switch to an alternate location. A big mistake. About 1 a.m., I wake up to slamming doors. Kyle is pacing back and forth in his bedroom, the living room, and out the front door, walking in and out of each room, turning the lights on and off, mumbling angrily and slamming the doors. I see his figure pacing back and forth through the frosted window of my room that leads to the living room. Since my room is dark, he cannot see inside. Suddenly he screams, "I can't live like this. Why are you doing this to me?" I think he's on the phone and I don't respond. A few minutes later, he screams my name repeatedly and I realize that he's directing it towards me. I knew that I had to get the heck out of there. So I very quietly creep out of bed and start getting dressed and packing a bag of clothes for work in the morning. I'm almost done when he screams, "I hear you," and he charges over to my room, slapping the wall next to my door but not touching the door itself. I look towards my window and see his shadow lean all the way forward, pressing his ear against the glass. I was terrified and I sat completely still, unmoving. He eventually screams my name again and moves away from the window, and I hear him start pacing between rooms again. Now, my shoes are kept on a rack outside of my door, and not inside my room. So I know that when I leave, I'm going to need to take a moment to put them on. I decide to wait until his pacing takes him out of the front door again, at which the time I plan to grab my shoes, put them on, and run. As I'm formulating this plan, the pacing stops. He screams, "Do you want to fight about this? Come out right now and we'll fight, I swear to God." I'm a very small 5-foot girl and this guy is easily 3 times my size, so I'm definitely not looking for a fight, thanks. After a few minutes, he turns off all the lights, and I hear the door to his room open and close, followed by silence. I wait for a moment to be sure that I can't hear any movement, and then decide to take my chance. I took a breath and I pulled my door open quickly. I step out and I grab my shoes before I look up a second later, and see him standing shirtless, with just a pair of boxers and socks on, in the dark of the hallway. His arms hung slightly outward in an awkward position. He says in a low, calm voice, "Ma'am, we need to talk." This was a hard no for me, so I grab my shoes and I run out the door with them in hand. I run about half a block barefoot before I stop to put them on. When I look back, he's standing in the porch light of our front door, watching me run but not moving. Luckily, I had a friend who lived 2 blocks away and I had their spare key, so I let myself in and I crashed there for the night. And that's where I stayed for the next week or so while we worked things out with the master tenant, and Kyle agreed to move out within the week. He said he doesn't remember anything that happened, or wasn't sure if it was real or not, but if I said that's what went down, then it must be real. The day that Kyle left, he sent me a photo of the house keys sitting on the table and says, "I'm out, nothing else." I take a friend over there with me to scout it out and to ensure that he actually did leave. When we get there, we discover that not only had he left a ton of food and furniture, but he had ripped all the fire alarms out of the ceilings. He had unscrewed and removed the deadbolt to the front door, and left them lined up neatly on the front table. We then realized that my front door can only lock by using a key from the outside, and it had been locked when we had arrived, meaning Kyle still had a key. We called a locksmith immediately. Even after changing the locks, I was still terrified to stay there alone afterwards, and I never went to sleep at night without barricading the doors with chairs and other furniture. To this day, I still fear for his safety. He was obviously psychologically unstable, but also wonder what could have happened if I hadn't been as lucky as I was. When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was in a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to campus, so it was the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29 and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide and had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet, but she seemed to like me and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell that something was a little bit off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I shrugged it off with a, "Thanks?" I mean, I looked nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it just didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me to see it. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all of his movies. I didn't know what to make of it. It was creepy. The whole night, she had been saying that I look like him, and now it's obvious to me that she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks passed and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together really. She would come home from work and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had this creepy, high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls all night. I wondered what the heck she could possibly be doing. Occasionally, she would come out and talk for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected that she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything and she would just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised and say, "Hello, Beth." And then there would be this long, awkward pause and she would give out her creepy, high-pitched giggle. It was a little uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night, I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom and all the lights were off, but I could still see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it, and she was turning the lock back and forth over and over again. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Barker, Max Barker, Max Barker. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out. And it doesn't help that she kinda looked like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and I tried to sleep. One night, I was watching Gladiator and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, forcing me to pause the movie, which was annoying. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue into the topic, but I just said sure and then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story and she was so riled up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't listening to me when I was asking her to lower the volume. Amidst all of her screaming, one thing she said really freaked me out. She was in such a fit and yelled, "I'll frickin' end his life." That was a big game changer. Suddenly, I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening, and she started doing her giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to my room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in the house with her, and what's worse is that there was no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act as a little barricade. Later on, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was trying to push the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk and had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning, when I went out into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives was on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think about was her saying what she would do to her ex-boyfriend. I confronted her about it, and she said that she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said that she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and I moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned my phone on, and to my shock, I had received more than 40 text messages that she had sent to me over the past 2 hours. They were all just crazy texts that ranged from everything between, "Hi, how are you?" and "I freaking hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond and I never heard from her again. I always wonder if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly come into my room and done the unspeakable? It freaks me out.